Will Pucovski's early retirement from cricket, the spate of hamstring injuries in the NRL, and what you can do to change your beliefs about a recurring injury or chronic pain that you experience. All of that on this week's Injury Persona Wrap. I'm Ian Hawkins, and this is Sport is Life. The purpose of sport, as I see it, is to see your vision become a reality. Find your voice, create strong connections, and learn to trust your body. On this week's Injury Persona Wrap, I want to talk about two things. The NRL, the weekend of the hamstring injury. I think the Bunnies had 3 injuries in one team. But also Will Pucovski, really sad story, retiring from all cricket at such a young age. He played one test match. He got a very well-made 60-odd. Seemed to have the big future ahead. He talked about he wanted to be that person. The interview I saw, he said not just be in the team, but be a leader of that batting group. And he just had such big plans. And unfortunately, it's all come to an end because of the reoccurring impacts of multiple concussions. It was interesting when at one point where they, the news was, he suffered another concussion, and then the next news report the next day was, well, no, he's been tested, and actually some of those more recent concussions weren't actually that. It was more of a mental reaction to previous events. So almost like I guess it was kind of, I took it as like a, his fear was this is what was going on, but that was more like a placebo or nocebo effect of okay, well, when this happens, it equals this. So he got hit in the head, and then he's gone into these symptoms, but that weren't necessarily showing up physically. But now he's, the quote that I wrote down: "Things didn't leave me." So the symptoms that he'd had in the past that have stopped, they're repeating. He's stuck in this pattern. I mean, that'd just be so scary, it'd be so distressing, and he might not even be thinking too much about the fact that, I'm missing that cricket career, because he's just so much of a struggle just having to deal with those physical symptoms. He talked about his wife was getting frustrated, or his partner's getting frustrated because he was sleeping a lot. He didn't have the energy to do things. He was really struggling to function, like heartbreaking. And I'm not going to jump on here and say that outcome could have been any different. I would love the opportunity, have we explored all possibilities? Because I know, what I've learned about a whole lot of different areas of health is that there's many more solutions than what is standard practice. Like the example I often use, my dad passed away from lung complications. I've learned so many different things that could have been in Chinese medicine, alternative medicine, and for all sorts of kinds, naturopathy, and then the work I did in the grief space. Like, grief shows up in lungs, and I've had those coughs when I've experienced grief, and I've also heard it from other people, and I've helped them work through that, and I've helped them remove that cough without having to do anything else except deal with the grief that's going on. And such is the power of the healing nature of the body. I've also more recently, with some challenges my son had, and finding out that a lot of it was to do with his gut health. He'd been in a fight or flight response for many, many years, which was impacting his gut health, and then having to go through the stage of rebuilding it through some supplements, and working with this guy just locally that managed to stumble across that has so many different titles. He's a doctor. He's also kinesiologist. He does naturopathy. He does, he's got chiropractic. He's got so many different things. So he comes from so many different angles, and really amazing to see. But again, there's so many different options. And I would have loved the opportunity to work with someone like Will to explore those options. I worked with a woman about 4 years ago who'd had repeated concussions. She came off a motorbike. I'm pretty sure I said this in a previous episode just recently, but if you didn't listen to the episode, it's worth hearing again. Or if you did listen, it's worth hearing again. If you didn't, well, I'm going to tell the story anyway. And she was finding they were repeating. More recently, she's had a car accident. All of those symptoms that she'd had with previous concussions started coming. She was losing confidence because she wasn't able to find the right words. She was starting to doubt herself. She was having these headaches come on, and all of these symptoms were repeating. And we did a whole lot of work around, well, what was underlying to that? What was playing out with some of those earlier concussions? What was the behavior or the situation or whatever that led to that first concussion, and dealing with that side of things. And then the ripple effect from that is okay, well, how are those same patterns showing up again in this particular instance? And part of it was feeling underappreciated, undervalued, and then being down on herself about those things. A lot of that came back from family of origin sort of patterns of different reactions from one of her parents. I can't remember exactly. It was a few years ago now. But then all of those symptoms clearing up and her not having those symptoms again, and getting that clarity of thought, getting her confidence back. The headaches went, the mental clarity came back, all of those different things. And again, what's possible for the body to heal when we work on the underlying pattern. So again, extremely sad. I'm again not going to come and say that I could have solved these problems. Of course, there's a physical element, but every physical injury also has an underlying emotional and mental side of it as well. And when I have these conversations, even with the clients now, they go, yeah, but there's this going on. I'm like, yeah, sure, absolutely. We're not taking that away from that. You need to do that rehab, absolutely. What's going to speed up the recovery and make sure you don't have a repeated pattern of the injury is to make sure we address that root cause so that it doesn't happen again. Anyway, he's made his decision now. Who knows? Maybe I'll get in front of him at some point and we clear that up, and maybe there's a comeback at some point. Unlikely, but that's the dream. Yeah, now the hamstrings, and I mentioned previously around hamstrings, I was talking about, I think it was Tom Trebojevic back in one of the earlier rounds when he had a strain, and he's had repeated hamstring injuries over the years, and talking about how sometimes hamstrings is like people getting beyond the level that they're ready for, and then their belief system doesn't take them to where they want to go, and then the injury kind of brings them back. They just don't believe they're that good. And then there's some of them that like, well, they're playing a bigger game than everyone else, and they're like, oh, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm need to bring myself back. It's almost like a self-sabotage reaction. And also, interestingly, the hamstrings also about times of stress, maybe more anxiety going on. They're sometimes when there's a lot going on, so overworked, but not as much physical, because these professional athletes are always working really hard and training their body, but sometimes that fear of failure, there's like a perfectionism, the pressure to perform, either they're putting that on themselves, it's coming externally. Of course, there's always pressure to perform at that high level, but what if the pressure is coming from an external source? My work with athletes and their parents finds it often the root cause of feeling that pressure, putting that expectation on self and feeling it from their coaches and that sort of thing, comes from patterns they're running from a young age because of different ways their parents operated or role modeled different behavior. Again, not saying the parents are bad parents or doing anything wrong. These are inadvertent things that we all do. I've made a million mistakes. I'm still doing these mistakes as a parent, but instead it's like, well, if this is how my particular child reacts to certain situations, because they all react differently, what if I instead did this and they weren't then feeling that pressure? And it's amazing how much of these behavior changes from family of origin, again, can change all sorts of dynamics of how the athlete shows up, the relationship between them. Working with a young cricketer and his dad, and helping them to see not only how the pressure that dad was inadvertently putting on his son, but also then as they learned the strategies to have a more united team around the son's sporting journey, is just how many of the other cricketers at that level were experiencing the same pressure. An example would be when you don't yell anything out, but the moment one of the cricketers does something and the parent reels back in like a or turns away or whatever, the kid sees that, the athlete sees that, and they feel like they've disappointed their dad. So you imagine like what that's like, right? We're carrying this all the time. Now, these guys had done the work, so they had self-awareness around it. But everyone else was just playing out patterns that are just hardwired because their dad probably did that before, or they had someone else important in their life that did the same thing. So, yeah, this is we are fragile units in so many different ways, because we're just these patterns that our small brain decided that reaction equals this. And so then we repeat that pattern even as adults, even if we don't want to, because that's how strong the hard wiring is at the subconscious level. Well, the good news is we can recalibrate that and make sure we don't have those injuries again. The bunnies in particular, where 3 of those injuries happened, Wayne Bennett's a master of connecting with his players and having them feel good, and it's no coincidence that he's starting to get the best out of some of those players that maybe haven't had the best few years. Maybe instinctively he knows the right conversations to make sure that they feel good, and that maybe some of those injuries will clear up. It will be very interesting to see. So that's the wrap for this week. There are a heap of injuries that could have gone to so many different areas, but I want you to remember, the listener, that you don't have to buy into everything that you're told, to any diagnosis, to like the amount of injuries that I've been told that I would have to deal with for the rest of my life and now are not a problem because I've taken a different path towards healing them. Yeah, it's amazing. Amazed myself that I've been able to come out the other side of that because I got help from people who knew there was a different way. And not all of those injuries got fixed the same way. Some was like learning about something simple like chiropractic, but there was also acupuncture thrown in there. There was the emotional side of things, the mental side of things, just the sheer willpower of changing my thought around something. Like, you won't be able to play football for the rest of your life. One coach said, well, what if you didn't believe that? What if you believed that it was possible that you could? Okay, let's try that. And it's amazing what solutions show up. So for you, just being open to, if you've got a reoccurring injury or chronic pain or just anything that seems to repeat on you, be open to there's a solution out there, because most people say, I've tried everything. They haven't tried everything, and more than likely they've only scratched the surface. They've used a lot of mainstream things which haven't worked. A lot of mainstream things absolutely do work, but when you're not finding the solution you want, that's when you start looking outside the box, and as we know, that's where you start finding solutions. You've taken the time to listen to this whole episode. Now it's time to take action. Commit to one thing you've learned today and make it happen. And to avoid any obstructions, join the Sport is Life movement by clicking on the link in the show notes.